So it was recently revealed in a Vivicard drop that Vice Admiral Pomsky is the user of the Otter Otter fruit, which is very funny because he is one of a growing collection of Dover users who have the powers of animals that are primarily aquatic, or at least spend a lot of their time in the water. So him, Smiley, Kaido, Momonosuke are all based on these type of animals. We have an otter, a literal fish, the clone of a fish, and then an axolotl. And this is very funny because, as you know, Delphi users cannot swim. So it's always very entertaining to find out what the powers of particular characters are. And it's very funny to find out that they have the abilities of an aquatic animal because it means that a part of the ability is technically useless. And I just find that very funny within itself. But it's also quite interesting how creative the abilities tend to be without this natural habitat being available. Because when you think about Smiley, Smiley had a lot of ingenuity with his weird physiology because he would spit parts of himself over the giant lake that separates Punk Hazard. And that's how he would transport himself from side to side without having to swim in the water, which I find that very interesting and kind of unnerving considering he is toxic gas brought to life. Like how did he strategize like that? When you think about like what in the world was that about? That was really, how is he that smart? That is unnervingly interesting. Like how did that happen? But then you have characters like Kaido and Momonosuke, in which that's a funny way of getting around it because they have the fish fruit model Azure Dragon and the fish fruit model Azure Dragon clone, in which they are fish. By the way, I've always assumed that you categorize Devil Fruits animal first and then the model does not matter. So in that way, that tells us, one, there are probably more fish fruits out there, which is very funny. And two, even though he's a fish, he's primarily a dragon because the whole bit about him being a fish is based off of myth, as you may or may not know. So I find that very interesting that we have avoided the water completely with a fruit that's literally a fish. Very funny, very cool. I do wonder if either Kaido or Momonosuke are given gills in that form, so they would be in a similar situation to, like, say, I guess Jack, if they don't go unconscious, in which they technically would just be immobile in the water, but they can still breathe in the water. So that bit is interesting. And then, of course, it brings us back to Pomsky, whom, honestly, even though he has a very funny weapon and having a shell hammer, which goes back to the whole bit about how ours can use tools to open scallop shells and whatnot. But it's funny because he gets jobbed out a lot during the events of Egghead, primarily by Bonnie, in which she turns him into a little baby and then kicks him. That's very funny. But with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Paulipede. What's it?